All right, welcome back. Uh, Thank you all so much. We're going to get started with our panels for the night. So this first panel we're getting to is Acing Your Deeds List interview. We have a lot of really great people on this panel. I think that Jared is going to introduce them all, but the moderator for this panel will be Jared from 1836. He is also on the Beach Bliss Planning Committee and has done a lot of great work this weekend. So I hope you're not too tired, Jared, and feel free to take it away from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Cycron. I'm really excited for this panel. I've been looking forward to it for a while. I have been streaming this competition for the past 10 hours or so. So hopefully I'll be able to stay awake and coherent for the rest of this. But thank you to the rest of you for joining as well. Some of you I know in person and others I don't. So I'm kind of excited to have this all come together. So I think we'll get started with just a quick oh, there's Kinney, perfect. I'll do a quick just explanation of what the Dean's List Award is, and then I'll have everybody introduce themselves and kind of explain how they fit into that puzzle. So the Dean's List Award is a first robotics competition and first tech challenge award, which honors specific students within the program. So it's the only individual award for students at the regional and district level, I think. If I'm wrong, someone correct me, but I'm pretty sure that's the only individual one. That and like the UL Safety Star of the Day, which not discounting that, so two individual awards. Kind of think of it as like the Woody Flowers equivalent, but for students, if you're familiar with that award. And what happens is teams nominate students, events pick from those nominees, and then whoever goes on from those events goes to the championship. So the way that I fit into this, I was a Dean's List finalist, and I'll explain what that means in a bit, at the 2017 Idaho Regional. And if everyone else can just take it away and kind of explain, tell us what your name is, where, if you won the award, where you won the award, if you judged the award, where you judged it, if you mentor, anything like that. Maybe let's start with Pauline's first on my screen. So Pauline wants to go first.
Thanks, Jared. So my name's Pauline. I'm the event director for this, and I'm a part of Okra, as I'm sure you've seen my face all weekend. But for how I fit into Dean's List, I was a student that was nominated back in, I think, 2013, 2012, did not win, and then I became a mentor, have nominated several students, and has been a judge for several regionals by now. I think the first year I did it was 2015. I think the last time I did it was 2018. So I've been a judge for several Dean's List finalists. Yep.
Great, thank you. Amanda's next on my screen.
Hello, I'm Amanda Pham, pronouns are she, her. I was a Dean's List finalist from Georgia, the Georgia First Tech Challenge Championship back in 2015. And I am currently a stewardship specialist at First Headquarters. And I've judged Dean's List for a couple different states for First Tech Challenge throughout the years.
Awesome, thank you. Joy?
Yeah, hello, I'm Joy. I was a Dean's List finalist in the 2017 LA Regional with Team 4201 the Vitruvian Bot. I currently mentor that team as well and have worked to nominate several students, including a couple finalists.
Awesome. Chetana?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chetana Piravi. I was a Dean's List finalist at the 2015 Inland Empire Regional, and then currently I'm not involved with FRC or robotics, but I was the team captain of Code Orange my next year in 2016.
Awesome. And Kinney?
Hi, yeah, I was a finalist at the Arizona Regional back when we only had one in 2014, and then I won at the championship. That was also when we only had one championship. And then since then, I actually remembered that I judged Dean's List for FTC at a regional in 2015, and then I've had 4 students who were finalists.
Awesome. Okay, so now I want to move in to talk a little bit about the Dean's List process. So Pauline, can you explain how it works in the regional system? Oh, is there someone on the phone? There's someone on the phone. Who's there?
Yeah, this is Brayden. I joined on the phone, not on my app, because I was driving down the road, and I'm currently at Target. But
all good.
I wanted
Brayden,
to
you want to
jump in here.
introduce
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah, I didn't think my name showed up in the participants list.
Yeah.
My name is Brayden Fox. I was a Dean's List finalist in, 2018, I think. It's been a long time. at the North Carolina State Championships for FTC. So my background is pretty much strictly FTC. And that's pretty much the basis about me.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the process a little bit. So Pauline, can you explain how the Dean's List process works for teams that are in the regional system? This is specific for FRC. I don't know how FTC works, so I'm glad there's a few of you on here that I can ask.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely know only the FRC process in regionals, but essentially how it works is a team or mentor can nominate 2 students every year. That student has to be a 10th or 11th grader. They nominate through an essay that they send to a regional. At that regional, they will pick 2 students. They get interviewed, the students, by judges, and the judges will read your essay. And from there, they'll determine 2 semifinalists or finalists. If you get nominated, then you are a semifinalist. If you get it at the regional or one of the 2 nominations, you become a finalist. After you become a finalist, you move on to the championship level, where I believe you do not get interviewed, but you only get your essay read, and you get to have like this cool celebration. Dean Kamen is there, stuff like that.
You get some fun toys.
You get some fun toys. And if you win at championships, I believe there's 10 winners across FTC and FRC. You get some cool scholarships, cool swag. But yeah, that's kind of how the process works.
Awesome. I don't think there's anyone that's FRC districts, right? No. Okay. Basically, my understanding of that, in chat will correct us or berate us as soon as we're incorrect, is that it's essentially the same deal as regionals, except those finalists are announced or awarded at the district championship level rather than the district event level. So I don't know if different districts do things differently, or if they all just announce them at the district championship. But chat, let us know.
Hey, I'm from Georgia, and they actually, I was in state when they moved to district. So yeah, in the district model, usually students are interviewed at their district competitions, and then the finalists are evaluated and then announced at the district championship. So it's a little bit longer of a timeline because the students are interviewed, and then those interview notes usually get sent to a panel of reviewers, and then they're announced at the championship. But it's the same basic process.
Okay, right on. And then Brayden, is there anything that you want to share about how FTC might differ, or kind of same deal? You're muted. I don't know if you're muted because you're on your phone.
He did say he was at Target. He might be checking out.
What was that? I'm sorry. I actually am sitting in the checkout. What was that? I'm sorry.
Do you want to add anything about how FTC differs, or if it's kind of the same process that we described for FRC?
I'm sorry. So with FTC, it's pretty much the exact same. There's not a whole lot of difference in FTC and FRC in that standpoint. We just kind of, it's basically the exact same process with the smaller championships, the qualifiers, and then the state regional, and then you move on with the 2 from each state. So okay. It's basically the same.
Cool. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about the 2 components that go into a Dean's List submission. So the essay and the interview. So let's start with the essay. I think a lot of people on here have contributed to writing those essays before. So I definitely want to hear some of those tips. So the old way, probably from when everyone on this call was involved, is the mentors have a fairly vague prompt of talk about the following 10 traits about your student, and you have X number of characters and turn it in. HQ recently shifted to something that looks a lot more like the chairman's executive summary questions. So I have those questions up if I can find my tab. But okay, so it's 4 questions, and the first one is explain how the student embodies the philosophies of gracious professionalism and cooperation through the first core values, and then it goes and lists the core values, asks for some examples. How has the student increased awareness of FIRST? Describe the student's interests and or plans to continue engage with FIRST beyond high school. Please provide examples. Next one is to describe the student's technical expertise, entrepreneurship, and creativity. How does the student's individual contributions to the team benefit the team as a whole in areas of fundraising, outreach, robot build, programming, etc.? Provide examples. And then finally, explain how the students' leadership to their fellow team members, how do they motivate others, what's their leadership style, provide examples. And there's an 1,000 character limit for each of those prompts, so 4,000 characters in total. And that's rather than having one big old essay the old way. So let's kind of go around and anyone should feel free to jump in and kind of talk about their process. How do you go from once you know which student is going to be nominated from your team, how do you construct all of the great things that they've done and distill it into that essay prompt? If you haven't been involved in writing an essay, feel free to not answer that. But yeah, someone go ahead.
For me, the changes this year aren't that different. A lot of the award criteria was the exact same as those questions. It's just kind of been put into the actual content now. But I mean, in the past, it would just be, you know, copying and pasting that criteria into a document and then basically just like running a list of how the student like meets each of those criteria and then sort of fleshing out the essay from there. But I think that a lot of the time essays don't get written to the criteria that they provide, and it's kind of more of a like recommendation letter or something like that. And I've had a lot of success with my students with approaching it more as breaking it down via the criteria.
And Kinney, when you are writing those essays, how are students involved in that process, or are they not involved at all?
They're not involved. It's not a requirement of FIRST anymore. Whenever I was a student, we used to write the essays for the Dean's List people because it used to be like a team written. But now, since they've transitioned it to where only a mentor can submit it, they've changed some of the wording in the actual description of the award, where now it's implied that a mentor should write it rather than the team. But if somebody else, I mean, if that's wrong, then someone else jump in and correct me. That's been my understanding, though.
Yeah, so I think that you're right on with the mentor is the one that ultimately writes and submits it. I know on teams that I've worked with on this kind of stuff, a lot of the time the student is doing things beyond what the mentor even is aware of, the kind of the scope of it. So some teams have sort of a process to be able to have the students relay the information to the mentors. And a little bit later, I want to talk about the selection process for how a team selects their nominee. So maybe we can come back to that then. But does anyone else have anything they want to share about their process for the essay writing?
Yeah. So when I was writing Dean's List essays, I think the best thing to do is I did what Kinney did, split up the criteria, kind of add what you know about the student. I am a firm believer that the mentor that knows the student the best should have some collaboration on that document. The person may not be writing it, they might not be the best writer, but the person who has the best relationship with the student should definitely input stuff. They'll know more about them past just what they see in the shop. But as well, back on Code Orange, we used to do a little bit of interviewing with the student. I would actually talk to them and say, hey, like, this is what the criteria is. Tell me a little bit more about what you do here. Do you do stuff outside? What do you define yourself as, like a leader? And I think that helped, one, understand how the student would respond to questions, which kind of gives us a little bit for preparation. But two, it gives us just more material to work with, because I feel like they can describe some of the things that have changed them a lot, much more than I could ever, think of.
Yeah, definitely agree there. Our process starts with the selection process, where we're deciding, we do interviews to decide that. And based on the answers to those questions, that really guides how we're asking further questions to get to know them. So I'm working on, I did both last year's and this year's essays. And the first thing that I start with is I ask the students for a list of references of mentors, students that they've worked with, teachers. And I say, hey, can you give me a few emails? I'll contact them and say like, hey, what are some things that you notice about the student? Because I may see them for, the hours that we see them in the shop. They do a lot more outside. The students that they work with may have stories of impact of, hey, the student like really did something for me that changed my life. Or this person did an outreach event that really changed me. So getting to hear those stories, and that really shapes the essay. And then, kind of following what everyone else said, taking those interview criteria and matching those stories to see which fits and trying to answer those questions and tying all those stories together.
Cool. Okay, so when selecting a student for Dean's List as a mentor, how important do you all think it is that the students check every box on that criteria? So it has things like technical expertise, academic excellence, this and that. What do you all think about that? Is it important to meet all of them, most of them, some of them?
I'll say that when I won Dean's List in 2014 at the championship, that was having probably not touched the robot. I didn't really do anything technical until I became a mentor, actually. So I literally had nothing to do with the robot, next to nothing. So it was completely based on non-technical aspects. And I would say that with students, I tend to take the technical expertise and make it apply beyond the robot. So if they are really good with writing, that can be a technical skill. If they're really good with graphic design, there are ways to think about it besides just the robot.
I definitely think the new questions is also forcing us as mentors to pick students who are more well-rounded. I think in the past you could pick somebody. I knew another finalist my year who did very, very little outreach, but just did a lot in terms of in their team and impacting their team, and that worked. They were a finalist. But I think that you can't do that now because there's questions that specifically look for what do you do outside of the team. So I think that this new these new set of questions are really going to force the mentor teams to select students who are very well-rounded.
Yeah, I would agree. The new questions definitely emphasize that the Dean's List is really looking for students based off of, contributions to their team, outreach, and kind of eagerness to spread STEM and the ethos of first with others. So when it comes to technical expertise or specific technical things, the student doesn't necessarily need to know how to code and how to do mechanical on the robot and things like that. It's more about how they overall work with the team and reach out to others and spread first in STEM.
Does anybody have a fun interview story, either as the student being interviewed, the mentor in the room, or the judge in the room that they want to share? Doesn't necessarily have to be funny, just anything interesting from that.
I could go. I remember that when I had my finalist interview at the Inland Empire Regional, I was the first one of the day and I was so nervous. And I remember my mentors were outside timing me, and it went by so fast because I don't know what the time limits are now, but back then it was 10 minutes. And I think mine ended in definitely at somewhere around 9 minutes. And I was freaking out because, I thought, oh, they didn't want to talk to me anymore. They ended my interview early, so obviously I'm not that competitive, but then I ended up getting a positive result. So I think for the students who are watching, if your interview is less than the allotted time, don't necessarily take that as a bad thing, because I was freaking out all day, pretty much just kind of thinking that I didn't do well in my interview. But then later on, when I noticed the judges following me and stuff, I was like, oh, maybe I still am competitive.
I was going to say, I was one of those mentors out there. I'm like, you did 9 minutes and 45 seconds. You were fine.
Yeah.
And these judges would follow her around looking at what she was doing. I was like, you're fine. Don't worry.
I want to.
Yeah, it was nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I want to add on to that. So I was nominated by my team in both my sophomore and junior year. My sophomore year, I did an interview at the Orange County Regional, and that interview was double the allotted time. I don't know why. I don't know what was going on, but the judges talked to me for a really long time. I very much did not win at that event. And then the next year, I was at the Idaho Regional, and my interview was all of 6.5 minutes. And there were basically the same number of judges, same number of people nominated at both events. So for sure, a longer interview does not correlate to winning. I don't think a shorter one does either. I think you should just ignore the time and not stress about it. It's not something to stress over because every judge is different. And those of us who have judged different things also can tell you it's just you're trying to check off all the boxes that you need to check off on your judging materials. And sometimes that takes you a while and sometimes it doesn't. It might depend on the time of day that you're talking to the judges. If they're tired and they need to ask you more because they missed it when you talked fast the first time, like it could really be anything. So I wouldn't read into that too much. Pauline, as someone who's judged Dean's List, do you have any tips from the judge's perspective of things that judges are looking for?
I think when a judge asks you a question, I think a lot of the time people are super nervous and they kind of hear one part of the question and not the whole part. Someone's asking you, what do you do outside of just robotics? What does your outreach look like? People tend to answer like they'll start with one thing that kind of answers a question and then go off on a tangent. Really try to focus in on what the judge is asking. Like Jared said, like as a judge, you kind of get a checklist. You got to kind of rank each category of how these kids are doing, and being able to have a student that can really articulate themselves and can explain exactly what we're asking, I think is the defining feature. Because while the essay is super important and we definitely read them as judges, the one-on-one interaction with the student is really where that student can shine, and being able to just answer those questions well really makes a difference.
So I think I know based on that answer where you fall on this next one, but I'm curious to hear what everyone else has to say. How important is it to ask the question that is asked rather than answering the question that you want the judges to ask?
In any judging ever, please answer what was asked. It makes it a lot easier for the judges because usually, like Pauline said, they're going down a list and trying to make sure that they have the information for every box. And if you jump around, even if it's a question that's going to come later, that can lead to a little bit of a hassle on the judges' end as they try to sort out your answers and put the information in the correct boxes. So normally if you just wait and be patient, it'll come up later, but save off-topic tangents
to kind of
for
go
the
off
end.
of that. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, I think that's where like the practice really comes in, because I think what you could do is you could kind of figure out a way to answer the question, but also put in what you like want to express about yourself. Like, I know for me, it was kind of a while ago, so I don't remember exactly how I prepared, but this is also how I prepare for like interviews as well, like job interviews. Kind of have a list of like different things that you want to highlight to the judges. Like it could either be things you're expanding on from your essay, or just like, kind of more like human things in a way for them to see like your personality and like kind of, your personality, like who you are and like why you deserve to be the finalist. So if you kind of have those points like in your head, like, okay, I need to hit this, this, and this, you can kind of like answer the question, but then also like manipulate the answer in a way to put your point forward. And then kind of if you have like those, like say you have like 4 or 5 like stories or points that you really want to emphasize, then you can kind of tick them off in your head. Like, okay, I mentioned like that I was the president of OCRA in the last question. So even though this question might be better to focus my answer around OCRA, maybe I'm going to bring in this story just so I could like show a little bit more diversity.
Yeah, and one way to do that is really to push the students to be able to tie their stories together. So that way, if there's a question that goes into one thing, they can talk about that one thing, and then they can then have control over the interview by tying it to the next thing that they want to talk about, rather than so that they still answer the question, they still get the whole thing, but they also get to talk about everything that they want to. So be able to tie your story together as one thing really helps you control what you get to say.
And
practice, I've always, whenever I won Dean's List, like that was the first year they'd done interviews, so like I didn't practice beforehand, and I'm pretty sure I literally just like cried through my entire interview. I don't really remember what happened or what they asked, but it worked out. It was fine. But with like my students, I always make sure to practice Q&A with them. I think that it's really intimidating to go in by yourself to talk to a panel of judges about yourself. A lot of students don't like talking about themselves. And so doing Q&A in advance, usually it's like, I don't know, maybe 2 hours total of Q&A. And the judges, I mean, they pretty much ask the same questions. There's adjustments like year to year, but in general, they'd be asking the same questions over and over. So, you know, if you're a mentor who's nominating students for Dean's List a lot, I would just, you know, ask your student what they asked you, write it down, keep a running document, and then like year to year, you can do that. And my personal favorite question, I don't know if they still ask it, but I think they asked me was like, if there's one thing about first that you could change, what would it be? And that one is really good to ask your students in advance because it's really hard to think of on the fly when you're like, you know, 16 and you're trying to figure out what you would change about a program that you're really passionate about. So
you also might need to advise your students to not laugh when they hear the question, what does gracious professionalism mean to you? Because you'll probably be asked it, and most people's reaction when they hear those words is to immediately burst into laughter. But in fact, the judges are looking for a serious answer. So they just want to know, like, oh, you actually do understand the core values, because even though we all kind of poke fun at them a lot, it really is the underlying driving force of a lot of it. So I think just if you ask students those common questions in advance, then it will they just won't be caught off guard by these things that are like Dean's List judges could be anyone, right? So Pauline happens to be someone who was super involved in FIRST before becoming a judge, but there are other people that were not, and Dean's List judge could be their very first role at a competition. And so some of them you might have to be explaining first to as they're reading the questions directly off of the script, and then other people you're gonna have a much more natural conversation with. So just be prepared for all of those different variances.
I will add too, if you feel like you have a story to tell that's relevant, but there's not really a question that is asked that kind of fits it. I've had a Dean's List interview where I always ask at the end if there's anything I missed, if you want to tell me something, if there's any questions. And I had this one student, we had, I think, like 5 minutes left in that interview because she just answered everything so well. And I said, is there anything you want to tell me? And she told me her journey of getting into FIRST. And it was a really like heart-wrenching story of how she got involved in it. She ended up winning at the championship level as well. But if I didn't ask that and that student didn't share that with me, there were so many other participants that maybe didn't fit into a specific category that, you know, is being judged on, but it was important to her journey through FIRST, which is a big part of Dean's List. So if you feel like you have a story and it doesn't fit, you know, make sure at the end you try to get your word in if you really feel like it's an important part of your story.
All judges really, you know, in my experience, they just want to talk to you. You know, like it's scary when you're a student and doing that, but like they really just want to know like who you are, what you're excited about, like what you want to do. They just want to talk to you. And you know, a lot of teams I think really emphasize like professionalism. Like I go in with my resume and I have my suit on, but like if that's not how you are as a student, like that's not really going to resonate very well with the judges, and you're not going to feel comfortable. So it's just really important that you you know, stick with like who you are, just explain, you know, what you want to say about yourself and present yourself as you are.
Yeah, and I would add that for district
No,
models and the like FTC models where students are being interviewed at qualifiers or at district events and then announced at championship, the judges that you're seeing face-to-face and interviewing with may not be the people that are ultimately making a decision about you. For example, in a lot of FTC regions, they'll have judges doing interviews at qualifiers that then take notes and pass those notes on to the panel that ultimately makes the decision about region finalists. So making sure to get like your authentic personality and a lot of those kind of humanistic things across to the judges is really important, because a lot of the technical stuff they'll have in your essay or in their notes already. But those kind of one-on-one face-to-face things about you and about your personality is what the judges really need to be getting notes on if you're in a model where those judges are not ultimately the ones making a decision and reviewing your notes to pick a finalist.
So you read your essay before your interview.
Yes, read your essay. I think that FIRST will still email you your essay after the mentor submits it. They at least were a couple of years ago doing that. So definitely read it, because sometimes your mentors might bring up some obscure thing from your past that you weren't thinking about, and you want to have some answers ready. It's a pretty good.
I wanted to.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did we want to move on?
No, go for it.
Okay, I just wanted to say really quick, because I know we were talking about being authentic and really being yourself versus the professional aspect. I mean, to be honest, I don't know exactly how it is now. This was 5 years ago, but I feel like being authentic and emotional is really the way to go, because, and I was debating on if I should share this during this panel because it's kind of embarrassing, but during my interview, I actually did cry. Not because I was scared, but it was just emotional, just a few tears, because I was talking about because I was mentoring FLL kids at the time, and I was just talking about how much they've grown and how proud I am of them and stuff, and there were a few tears, and that was kind of another thing that I thought might have set me back, but it ended up working out good. So just kind of emphasizing that point of don't worry about being too professional or thinking about it as a job interview at all. I would say definitely kind of go into it trying to show how much of a human you are, because like they said, they already have the facts on the paper. So just being being true to yourself. And I know not everybody is as emotional as I am, but don't be afraid to let your emotions and true intentions show.
I also cried over the first Lego League kids I was coaching at the time. It definitely was
they really
do
tug on your heartstrings.
Okay, let's
I
want to
add to,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go
I don't
ahead,
know.
Brayden.
First off, I'm sorry if I wasn't muted for a long time. I don't know if you guys just heard me at Target, because I realized I may not have muted myself. I'm sorry about that.
You're all good.
I think you are good.
I do want to say, on top of the submission essay, make sure you read it, but try not to reiterate it in your interview. What you want to do is try and hit the things that your essay doesn't touch on as well, unless they want to expand on it, because they already have that information, and what they're wanting you to do, in my experience, is to expand on that. So try not to focus too much on things they already know necessarily, unless you're expanding on it, but you don't want to be repetitive, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think finding that balance is super important between reaffirming what your mentor said and kind of providing them more context, because they are so limited in their characters, but then also giving them new information. I know with the way that submission deadlines are and when regionals are, there was a lot of time that passed between when my essay was submitted and when I had my interview. And so there was a whole bunch of new stuff that actually came up over that 6 to 8 week period or whatever it was that was in between. And it was actually, it was pretty cool, because I got to say last week, here's some new stuff that happened. And I think the judges like that kind of thing a lot, when you're able to show that you're a constantly evolving person in a way. The same way that with the chairman's essay, you would want to show the team is progressing over time. You as an individual are also progressing over time and getting involved in as many new different things as possible. I want to move on to talk a little bit more about the selection process within teams. So I know every team does it a little differently. So Joy briefly had talked about hers, but I don't know if anyone else wants to share how their team picks who they're going to nominate for Dean's List. And then in addition to that, if you could talk about if you always nominate 2 students, if you sometimes nominate none or 1, depending on who your students are, if it's a consistent thing.
I've worked with a few teams, and it always has kind of just been a conversation among mentors. Sometimes we've had the team nominate people. Sometimes it's just been exclusively among mentors. Sometimes teams sometimes mentors want to nominate 2 people no matter what. Sometimes they don't. I mean, usually it's looking at the criteria and sort of narrowing down from there, making sure they meet at least most of them in some kind of capacity.
Yeah, so in 4201, we have a pretty large team. And because of that, we've decided that we will always nominate 2 students, even if they might not we're not sure if they'll be able to be finalists. We do want to celebrate them within our own team. And so we actually open up an application and students can do that. And then we interview every single one of our applicants, like a Dean's List interview, asking them the same type of questions. And we want to see, because there's some students who've done a lot, they just can't interview. And we'll coach them and we'll work with them, but we do need something to work with. So we figure that out, who's capable of doing that. And then based on that, we'll narrow down to those 2 students.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it different ways. I've had times where, you know, students apply to be a Dean's List applicant. I've had times where the mentors just vote and we figure out who we should be. I've had years where we think no students really fit the criteria. I've had years where, you know, there's like 5 that fit the criteria and then you don't know who to choose. But I think through all of that, I think I'm on the boat of I think everyone should nominate 2 students because the students will feel celebrated. I think the students deserve that. You know, there's going to be at least 2 hardworking students on your team. And I think everyone should, you know, just reading an essay that someone put time in about yourself is just so nice to hear that. I think every team should apply to. And I do think if I were to do it again, if I were to mentor next year, if I had to figure out a way to pick Dean's List people, I think I would, you know, do a mentor vote as well. But I think I would really, you know, do kind of a double duty with the mentors and with the students kind of nomination, because the students one could be a popularity contest, but it's also if they have really good facts about that student, they understand they're working together with the student more than we really are as mentors. So I think I would take both aspects in, and I think there would be 2 students that stand out from that.
Also, just really quick about the always nominating 2 students, it could look good for a student to put on their application that they're a Dean's List semifinalist. So, you know, even if you don't think that they're gonna, like, if you don't think that they maybe like check all the boxes and stuff like that, I mean, I think it's still worth it to nominate them, obviously for the reasons that Pauline said, but just another thing that they could put on their application.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, and then I'll talk about just 1836's process briefly. Oh, I hear myself. Great, fixed it. It was Chetana's. All good. Okay, so I'll talk about 1836's process, which has varied a little bit year to year. Some years I have gotten more involved with them than others, but it always is some sort of application process. So students have to actively apply, show that they're interested in it. And we often find that the students who are deserving of it don't apply for it, and then we'll push them to do that. It's a lot of people who I think are good Dean's List candidates are also shy to talk about themselves. And so we have had to push them before, but we'll make them fill out an application and all of that. And the application is usually based very directly on the criteria from first. So we might ask them the 4 questions that the mentors have to fill out for the essay, and we won't have them do it as long. We'll have them write like 200 words rather than 1,000 words for each of those questions or something. Other years we've had them write an entire essay, and then the mentors will be able to use that essay as their basis when they're writing the actual essay for submission, just so they can get kind of a starting point and see what it is that that student is actually passionate about. And then we do also have that mock interview, and I would say that the interview is never a disqualifier. We have some really great people that do really poorly during their first mock interview, but they are always coachable. If the student is doing stuff that's really great, it shouldn't matter, in my opinion, that they are not a great interviewee, because your goal is to put the best students forward, I think, even if their presentation skills aren't necessarily the best. But I know some teams differ on that. It kind of depends about all of your priorities. And then in terms of the 1 student, 2 student, no students situation, we pretty much always nominate 2. I would say that if the team has like not that many juniors or a weaker junior class, we'll nominate some sophomores that we know are going to have the chance to interview again. Maybe they're not ready this year, but the absolute best way to prepare for a Dean's List interview is to do a Dean's List interview. So if you do it in 10th grade and it's like doesn't go great, you'll have another chance in 11th grade, and you'll learn a lot, and you'll also probably do a lot in that year in between. That's a year that a lot of students do a lot of things. That brings me to my next point, which is Should be a pretty easy one, I think, for people to answer. I don't know if anyone's going to get on a soapbox, but should students do anything specific for the purpose of Dean's List? Say I'm a 9th grader and I come into a team brand new where I'm like, FL, I see Pauline yelling at me, but she's muted. That's really funny. So say you come in and you're this like 9th grader and you really want Dean's List, and that's your goal for your entire time on your FRC team. What do? Do you do something different?
No. I don't. Michael in the background thought I was yelling at him. No, I don't think you should do something different. I think the beauty of FIRST is that you're really doing stuff because you're inspired to do so. It's the same thing with the Chairman's Award. You really shouldn't do things for chairmans. You really shouldn't do things just for Dean's List. You should do it because you want to do it. You should, mentor FLL teams because you have joy mentoring FLL teams. I don't think you should just do something because it just checks off a box. And honestly, as a judge, we can see right through it.
I think if you feel inclined to go out and do outreach or things specifically for Dean's List, you should first stop and do a little bit of self-reflection and kind of figure out like why it is you want to actually be eligible, and what the Dean's List Award actually means to you, and whether or not you feel that you meet those criteria.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was a student who joined FIRST with basically no prior knowledge of what FIRST was. I found out about FIRST from joining it within my local area. And then even my team, we were such a new team that we didn't even know the Dean's List Award existed until the year that I was nominated. So I not only did I not even do anything specifically for the award, for the first couple of years I was in FIRST, I didn't even know it existed. So I was just being a student, participating in FIRST, volunteering at FIRST organizations because I loved it. So I think the most beneficial thing you can do is just, if you're passionate about FIRST, do what you're passionate about. And then if your passions align with the award, go for it. But like everyone else has said to not do anything specific, because I think not only is that a little bit disingenuous, but I think from a judging standpoint, it will also show as well the people who are working for the award for the sake of the award, and for the people who have been nominated for the award that weren't, gunning for it.
Going off of that, like in terms of like the 2014 class of winners who I was with, like some of us, we had like stuff that we did, like we had like a thing, like my thing was like starting the chairman's exchange or like writing the chairman's guide. And then like my good friend Cameron from Rush was like really involved with the National Advocacy Conference. But like there were also a lot of people who were like, oh, I'm like my programmer on my team. And so like it's not necessarily that you have to have like certain characteristics or anything. And I would say that like most of the students who I've had be really successful with Dean's List, it was because there was something tangible that they'd, like a specific project that they kind of worked on a lot, that they were really passionate about. And it wasn't like, obviously most of these people aren't like, as far as I know, they weren't doing it in order to get nominated for Dean's List, but a lot of really successful students have been successful in Dean's List by finding like a passion project, something that you're really excited about within your team, and sort of working on that.
And I think
honestly, like if we I could go really quick, but like if you kind of do everything, I mean, not even everything, but even if there's a few things that you do just for Dean's List, like the way I look at it is like you never know, you have no idea who you're competing against. Like when it comes to the robot, like, you could actually kind of like scout your competition and things like that. But I mean, you could be going up against like, a kid who has like started so many programs, done so many things. Maybe they have like started the chairman's exchange, like, crazy things like that. But so like kind of like hinging all of your hopes and stuff on winning the Dean's List, like it's so out of your control that you're kind of setting yourself up for failure in a way, because like I remember, this is kind of like more related to chairmans, but I remember my senior year, I was so disappointed that we didn't win chairman's my senior year, and we ended up winning the regional and Wood Flowers, but I ended up sad because we didn't win chairman's, and that kind of taught me the lesson that you have no idea who you're competing against, because I think we're going up against like a team from Israel who pretty much like started FRC in their country. Like, there's nothing that I could have done better to, win. So I think like doing things for the purpose of winning is kind of like setting yourself up for failure, because there's other reasons to do it, It's definitely a good goal to have and like kind of something to work towards, but hinging everything on it and doing things for it I would not recommend that.
And I also want to add on, there's not a specific formula for a Dean's List finalist or winner. There's nothing that you can do to guarantee yourself that position. So doing something to strive for it, you don't even know if it's adding anything to it. I've worked with several students, and the finalists their stories are completely different. Some focused on outreach, some did incredible things within their own team, changing their team's culture that just caught the judge's eye. So don't try to do anything to get Dean's List, because likely that's not even contributing to that equation.
Yeah, I feel like it's mostly about your personality, or not mostly, but I feel like it's a large part about your personality and like just how you are, and you can't really change that.
Great, thank you, everyone. We're running up on time, so I'm going to present two final questions, and you can choose to answer one, neither, or both. So first is, are there any doors that were opened by Dean's List or anything after you won at the regional level or the championship level that really made a big difference? That's question one. And then the second one is if there's anything interesting that you're up to in first or greater worlds right now that you just want to share with the community, because I think there's a lot of great people on this panel that are doing some cool things. So whoever wants to go first, go for it.
I could go if nobody else wants to.
Do it.
Okay, so wait, I'm sorry. Could you repeat the first question? That's my bad.
Yeah, first one is just if there's any doors that Dean's List has opened up or anything.
Oh,
cool
yeah.
That happened. Cool.
Okay, so so anything cool that happened? Well, to be honest, I feel like for me the big thing was confidence, because like even now I feel like that's kind of one thing that I struggle in. Like in my workplace, I'm just kind of like, oh, I should be better with this. I should be better with this. But just having that like kind of reassurance, like really, I feel like took me to the place where I needed to be as far as confidence wise. I didn't end up getting into like the schools that I thought that Dean's List was going to help me with. But when I did end up at Cal Poly, I think like so after Dean's List, I ended up becoming the team captain of Code Orange, and we all had a really successful senior year. And then going into college, just kind of having that like, reassurance under my belt, I feel like it made me really like inspired to become involved in college. And I ended up becoming the president of a club at college, which ended up in me getting like my full-time job. So and I'll be honest, like after I didn't get into the schools that I thought that Dean's List was going to help me with, like I was a little bit disappointed. But then looking back, like just because it didn't help me in the way that I thought it would, looking back, like it really helped me long term, because I had that confidence and kind of like that extra boost I needed to go and like, apply it to be the president of my next club and apply for, different internships and jobs, like kind of just knowing that, okay, maybe I am good enough for these things. Because, I'm in supply chain, and like pretty much in all my classes, I was like the only girl. Sometimes there'd be one other if I was lucky, but kind of just being surrounded by like, being the only girl all the time, like it was a little bit of a confidence like downer. Like I was kind of like, oh, maybe there should be somebody else applying for these roles. But then just having that and like just the whole FRC experience in general under my belt, I think really like built me up for being successful in college and then now working on my career.
Yeah, I definitely connect with that. I don't think the award itself opened up any doors, but I think the process of first, even just learning how to interview, like that's something that we like to give students that opportunity within the sign-up process, because even if we don't select them, they now have a interview or two under their belt, and that really helps them prepare for future, for college, for position, for job. And I think kind of again of like learning, what do people want to hear about my experience, even is like learning like what is important to share. I think learning those things helped set me up for future internships, for future other extracurriculars. But I don't think the award itself particularly did anything for me.
Yeah, the year that I won was the last year that seniors were allowed to be nominated. At first I was like, oh, that sucks. Like seniors can't be nominated moving forward. However, after doing the things that you're invited to do as a Dean's List winner, it 100% makes sense. Like by the time I won Dean's List, like I was already committed to a university. Like I didn't, it didn't really impact my like immediate ability to do anything. So it's definitely better now that sophomores and juniors are only nominated for it because, you know, like we went back to New Hampshire and you do a bunch of tours, you get to go to MIT and Yale and like talk with their admissions advisors and things like that. At that point in time, I'd already done a semester at the state college that I was going to over the summer. So it was like, it was cool, but it wasn't super helpful. But I know that like, you know, one of my finalist students, he went to MIT and he thinks that a lot of that had to do with, you know, being a finalist. And I have a finalist who went to Olin for engineering, and she thought that had something to do with being a finalist as well. So you can definitely leverage it. And, you know, I'm not even in STEM. Well, I'm in STEM now in my master's program, but like in my undergraduate, I did English and creative writing. So it's, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to like apply to what you're going to do in the long run.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I gained the most from being a Dean's List finalist wasn't tied to the award specifically, but it was more tied to the connections that I was able to make when I went to championship and when I met my peers and started connecting with people on social media and met more and more first partners in my area and things like that. So I think that the networking that Dean's List opens up definitely has more potential, in my opinion, than just putting Dean's List finalist or Dean's List winner on your resume in college applications.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Jared was one in my year, and our group kind of like all created this chat, and we attempted several projects. I don't know how many of them actually went through to like increase, yeah, increase like the first LA thing is kind of exists. But we just kind of work together to do and put all our minds together to do some outreach, to do various projects. And I think connecting that way and interacting with each other, keeping up with each other that way was again very beneficial. So definitely agree with Amanda, networking through Dean's List actually is very effective.
Yeah, I wanna echo that because in 2017 I got Dean's List finalist at our last regional, and the team had not qualified for the championship at that point. But all the Dean's List finalists go to the championship if they want to. So I went on my own and I signed up to volunteer at the championship, and then little did I know 1836 was going to get off the wait list a week before the event. But I just let them do their thing and I volunteered at the event. So it was really cool because I was a high school junior volunteering at the first championship. It was a lot of fun. And now, like Joy was talking about, we have this crazy group chat. Brayden's in here too on the phone. He's in that group chat. We have a whole like Facebook group and all this stuff, people being able to connect from really all over the world. Pauline or Brayden, did either of you want to say anything on the closing question?
Sure. I mean, for me, so I never won Dean's List, but I have judged it. I've gotten to write some essays for amazing students. And I think that part of it just inspires me so much, as cheesy as it sounds. Like hearing the passion in these kids' voice about FIRST that I felt at such a young age and still feel is just so nice to hear from someone. It gets you emotional. Like I'm even getting emotional right now talking about it. But really, really, every time I hear someone talk about how much they love what they do and how much they want to do more, it just really inspires me. For the second question of what I'm up to, because I can't answer the first part, I'm an engineer at Virgin Hyperloop. We just, put people in a Hyperloop today, so I'm excited about that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Brayden, did you want to add anything else? Okay, he's probably still at Target. Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, we are well past our time. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. This was a lot of fun. I really miss talking to people. And so I'm really glad that you were all able to join in on this and kind of share your experience. And for those of you watching at home, I hope that this was at least a little bit helpful with you when you're figuring out how to write a Dean's List essay, do your Dean's List interview, whatever it is, or just how to kind of be a well-rounded person. And first, all of the people on this panel, I'm sure, are more than happy to interact with you and answer those questions. So just thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, and if anybody watching, like wants to ever like practice Dean's List or just wants like Dean's List advice, you could just message the Code Orange Instagram and they could put you in touch with me if you guys want.
Thanks. All right. I think Cyclone's going to emerge from somewhere.
We have
There he is.
Yes.
Emerge from the shadows.
Yeah, as always. We're gonna thank you all so much for taking a part of this panel. This was a lot of fun. I know I learned a lot. It was cool to listen to people who've won the award before and got to go through that process.